Chapter 48. A Contest of Heart and Mind. Those harrowing eyes now swallow us, a defiant blue alike his cultivators, but weighed sullenly. Its gloom is dense insomuch that the mass and tug of its plight is felt in the breath of our lungs. Terror, then madness, then misery. It feels in bursts of loneliness singularities with a stark division and a deterring barrier between each emotion. They do not blur nor confide with one another. The child of suffering's current disposition may perhaps be our best window of opportunity, for during misery it is lethargic and timid. Best we capitalize on such an opening before it runs its course and indignation takes the helm. Do well to listen. We attack now. Reserve enough of a margin to respond defensively ought the child return to madness, but otherwise strike and strike hard. I command their attention effortlessly, and I do not feel as though I am removed or elevated from my position for doing thus. Though I have never considered or garnered aspirations for a position as an alpha, I am leading as one would, and with a legitimately recognized alpha general amidst my pack. And what a pack it is! It is an unconventional one, this is certain, but it is my pack nonetheless. This party of mine is composed of an alpha general gifted with the works of life, the revered colorless assassin, and the legendary lock sage, all of whom ought to be firm in my captaincy. I trust in them, and they mirror this trust. The wounded payman and aged Jai both nod. Ambwal, however, extends his hand in a gesture as to be gifted something.
The key, as well as the other two artifacts. I shall initiate the ritual of replenishment and transmutation.
The sage assigns an outrageous condition to his adherents. What are you going on about? I need these to fight, and now is no time for replenishment. Nevertheless, I do not have the key. It is jammed in the sealing gate. I gave him reply in earnestness, anger, and shame.
Do not become owned by that which you own. Do not assume that you are that which you use, for the soul is as the hull, and the mainsail is but a tool. The latter you may do without by dutifully rowing, but forsake the prior, and you shall surely sink. You've long appropriated the aspects of these artifacts. Their powers belong to you now without expiration. In any manner, their utility as they are now makes waste of their optimal purpose and form. As for the key, I may call upon it, for as its maker, and I am familiar with its signature.
He snaps, and a subtle flash emanates from his fingers. When it subsides, the key is within his grasp. Furthermore, he holds it as though it has no weight.
Hand the other two artifacts to me. I will enlighten and ordain you. Allow Jai and Payman to afford us the moment.
His gloved hand outreaching, still as a statue.
Trust him, and trust us as well.
Jai reinforces. We are not at liberty to disagree, and to frivolously spend what we do not have will further incur the cost of our prevalence. Thus I dubiously agree. So be it. Be careful, you two. I revert to my Omani base, collecting the fan from my wings and map from my sight, and extending them forth. I cede the hard-sought and rightfully earned artifacts to the sage. During this, not for a moment did a shred of our collective awareness slip from the chaos-stricken offspring, sniveling to itself. Its melancholy gives me urge to save it and not to kill it, but I am no longer so naive. Killing it to end its suffering and save Oma is all that may be done. With that unnatural birth, it ought not exist to begin with. Ambual receives the pieces, levitating them in a harmonious twirl. Payman fashions a platform of vines for Giant himself, and they proceed forth, cautiously and with a determined intent to be done with his nightmare. The artifacts spin amongst one another with a gradually accelerating pace until the blur of the spiral of gold makes the pieces indistinguishable and unobservable individually. As the daring Omani approach the reserved child of suffering, they fall into the danger of its perception. Payman does not allow for it any time as to discern whether or not they are friend or foe. Thrusting his wooden arm upwards, it buds a captivating and serenity-inducing flower from the ball of his palm. The gold and Titian blossom spins feverishly, yet elegantly, spewing forth a shower of glimmering petals along the bleak and desolated island. This magnificent beauty, so starkly foreign within our beaten realm, calms the woe-conceived child, though only moderately. The creature stares inconclusively at the glamorous freefall, pulling no meaning from the temporal tranquility, and yet is charmed by it nevertheless. There appears, from its soulless gaze, to be no conceptualization or attachment of thought. It only basks in the sensation. Payman sends Jai forth.
Command, obey.
She delivers her almighty command in a nurturing, grandmotherly tone.
Be at peace.
Can so complex a command possibly register in something without a soul? This thing is but the embodiment of suffering, and yet, to my astonishment, the child loosened its constraining frigidness even further. The tormented creature is relaxing, brilliant. The fusion of Payman's soothing flower technique and a warm, well-intentioned command from an elderly master of seems to have pacified it. Behind me, Ambual raves in a trance, reciting from a forgotten language as the spiral of gold catches fire. He reaches into the gleaming flame and retrieves from within it an ornament blade of the same gilded gold as the artifacts. Upon both palms, he gracefully presents it to me whilst taking a knee.
I present you with Parias' longsword, Art Fatis Masar, the Faithmaker. Know now, by accepting this blade, N of Essel, it becomes incumbent upon you, by the holy binding of God, to assume the role as the head of the Yalumic Temple, which is to come for the sake of all realms. This duty shall be your greatest, greater even than the vanquishing of Tiamatu. Take it. It is yours to finesse, to cut down foe and to defend his name. You will do thus with the finest blade to ever grace our world.
Ambual, humbly bowed, leans the dazzling weapon towards me. The embroideries of the ancient world beautifully sprawl from the base of the blade to its tip. The hilt is masterfully wrapped in a silk of fine scarlet. From end to end, it is perfectly level. Its weight is one that floats well without forsaking its sturdiness. Its pommel is fashioned in the image of Parias' key. Faithmaker, true to its epithet, is a wondrous and inspiring blade. Once my inspection and veneration of the longsword is satisfied, we proceed. As we join the other half of our company, we come to find that the young monster is sound asleep. Curled in a ball and laying on its side in the bed of petals, it rests serenely. At last, it is undisturbed by its woes. One may only speculate as to the manner of dreams such a being could participate in, if any at all. The way in which it nudges its head upon the dirt to burrow into a more comfortable position certainly makes me prone to believe that it does indeed dream, and that it does, too, have a will. If there is truth in this, however, it would beget a circumstance much more difficult to go on with. Is this an innocent infant victim of an ill-fated conception, bearing the burdens of beings it never knew and will never know? Ought it be this, how then can I bring myself to murder it with a clean conscience? Why, in this instant, this child appears no different than the one just born of Corvana. At present they both sleep the very same. A bark-calloused hand clasps my shoulder.
Why is it that you hesitate?
Payman asks, looking at me in curious alarm. I cannot kill this child. It seems wrong, unjust, immoral. Betrayed by the moment, what began only as an inkling of the possibility for sentience has plagued my mind with doubt and guilt.
And thus it will suffer for an eternity. It will pillage the realms in arbitrary madness until there is nothing. Then it will suffer and suffer and suffer forevermore. Ambual did not claim that this thing possesses a life expectancy. He only had said that it can be killed. If no one is to ever vanquish it, there is no telling how long it would live.
Jai says sternly, abandoning the grandmotherly tone she employed against the child. I do not respond, for I am frozen at the base of a two-pronged fork. Rarely does a splitting road of such a nature rejoin again. She continues.
You mistake its mortally vulnerable poise and infantile language of the body for evidence of a soul. That is your mistake. But look. Look with your ability to peer into souls and memories and tell me what it is that you find. You will find nothing. Emptiness. That is its greatest suffering. Utter isolation against all beings and ideas. It is an animation lacking any chance of purposes or meaning. A sort of suffering that you can relieve it of after you choose.
She is correct in that I cannot use my infiltrate command against it, and consequently, because of this, she may be right about the child overall. It is simply a caricature of the living, and not alive in and of itself. But it damn sure imitates life with such an impeccably cursed accuracy. I am plagued with this most demanding of duties. Jai. I look to her in search of pity, and for her to tell me that I do not have to do this. For her to say it is okay, and for anyone to inherit this responsibility from me. But nobody does. Nobody will. Nobody can. This sword is fundamental in puncturing the torment-hardened child, and it may only be brandished by me. There exists nothing sharp enough to circumcise our enemy from this world save this legendary blade. The sage foresaw this. Jai says nothing to the tune of my comfort. She watches me close as I internally arrive to the summation of the answer that she has already given me, recalculating my work to be doubly sure as to its validity. Her deep and folding wrinkles make no way for emotion amongst the desert of her crowded and barren face. These creases of skin can shade any affection or sliver of sadness which could escape her, if any is there. Yet, I know it is there. I know that she knows that I know it. Despite this, she cannot reveal it, and this is for my sake. A sake which I prefer she discard entirely. I am no child, yet she insists on interacting with me as if I were. And after all I've done, what more can I do to gain her respect, not as a wolf, but as an adult capable of seeing his duty through? As someone competent in assessing and executing upon a circumstance with irreversible consequence. Ah, right. Of course. This is that. My final test is not to be one of strength, nor speed, nor cunning. It is not an examination of my skill, nor a vetting of my strategy. In a sense, it is not even an assessment of my knowledge, leastwise not this alone. It is trial of heart and mind. Do I know which to choose between these warring two? And when I ought choose one over the other?
Evil often elects to disguise itself as good. It has done thus since the beginning, and it will do thus until the end. I tell you, this abomination before us is a deception inspired by an evil beyond Tiamattu, and that Tiamattu himself has been beguiled to put into service such a heinous ploy.
Ambual cleaves through the long and drawn-out silence, one too long to be deemed solely as hesitation, and yet hesitation is plainly the culprit that relayed the pause, grinding it into deep reflection that had ensnared me as though it were a quicksand of the mind. You mean to say that this newborn is inherently evil? I ask him.
Precisely. And perhaps more accurately, it is an instrument of evil. Tiamattu is toying with your heart, turning it against your better knowledge. He has long observed you, for you are a descendant of his nemesis, and thus he knows your charity well.
I look to the slumbering enigma, tucked into the crust, surrounded by the seducing petals, and I tightly clutch the long sword of Parias with both of my hands. Inside I am trembling. Yet, on the surface, I am immovable. This is courage. Action, not an absence of fear, but despite it. The work that must be done is scarcely of a charming nature. Throughout my odyssey, and certainly in this moment, I have been and am faced with this realization time and time again without rest. In this instance, however, in this peculiar happening, I cannot ignore it. The lesson beckons and taunts me. If I turn away, it latches onto my backside until I chance a glance at it again. All right. I understand. I assume my final Drakin form once more, absent the aid of the individual artifacts, just as Embual said I could. With my eyelids tautly shut, my jaw clenched and conviction set, I raise the sword high over its victim. I sense the others recoiling with the urge to turn away. However, none of them do so. They resolve to bear this burden with me. I wait for the wind to calm. It does, and by its finishing gust, I bring down my blade, watching with my hands and ears, recreating the image in my mind of that which I avoid with my eyes. The sensation of the blade sliding through flesh meets the sound of metal striking stone. It is done. The curtains of my eyes roll back, exposing a climbing black vapor in place of the child. It had disintegrated from the blow. The pressure of the task fades with its completion. Praise Yalum. Jai, Payman, and I sigh in the grandest of reliefs. I can hear all of our hearts, save for Embwal's, thumping against their bony cages, but subsidingly so. The struggles and woes of our days are mitigated outwardly by each of the slowing beats. A leisurely clap of applause ensues from the devastated Tiamattu, who lays crippled in the wake of the late child of suffering. The god's palms erect above him, dramatically yet languidly applauding our triumph. His wound still in the process of regenerating. The child must have been as a bottomless well of vitality for him, for the rate he heals is lethargic in comparison to when they were one. We converge around the felled deity.